Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we take, well, a whole pile of sources, different perspectives, research, and try to boil it all down into something clear, concise, and hopefully pretty fascinating about the world we live in.
Yeah, trying to make sense of the complex stuff.
Exactly. And today we're plunging into a topic that, well, on the surface, it looks incredibly dramatic, doesn't it? Especially if you're scrolling through social media or, catching headlines.
Oh, yeah. High-profile military airstrikes, big operations.
Right. You see that, like, fast-cut footage. You read these bold claims, surprise attacks, tactical genius, all that. But what if the reality behind those operations is actually, well, a lot more nuanced?
And incredibly complex. Maybe even completely counterintuitive to what you'd expect.
That's where we're headed. Today, our deep dive is focusing on a recent-ish type of military operation, one involving U.S. B-2 bombers, specifically designed to deliver a very particular kind of ordnance.
And our mission here really is to go way beyond those surface-level takes, the ones that dominate the conversation.
Yeah, the hot takes.
Exactly. We want to explore the really intricate logistics involved, the strategic thinking that has to underpin these super high-stakes missions.
And maybe most importantly, the often surprising ways that communication or even like deliberate transparency plays this huge, sometimes paradoxical role in what most people probably see as, stealthy secret actions.
It's a fascinating puzzle.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our goal is basically to debunk some common myths you might have picked up about modern warfare, especially the logistics side.
Give you a more realistic, kind of grounded view of how these big geopolitical moves actually play out on the world stage.
And show how even something super advanced like stealth technology still operates within this framework that actually, bizarrely, needs transparency sometimes, needs de-escalation, especially between the big global players.
Right. It's not always about sneaking around. Sometimes it's about being seen in the right way by the right people.
So this deep dive, think of it as your shortcut to getting informed about the hidden complexities, where appearances can be really deceiving and the real power plays often happen way out of the spotlight.
Absolutely. And it really has to start by challenging that big myth, that idea of the surprise attack in the strategic sense.
Yes, exactly. Because if you've been anywhere online or watched certain news channels that really leaned into the drama, you've definitely seen analyses of major military actions, especially when they involve planes like the B-2 bomber, the popular story, the one that spreads like crazy.
Yeah, it's always the same narrative, isn't it?
It paints this picture of an unprecedented surprise attack. These incredible stealth planes just slicing through enemy airspace, totally undetected.
Low resistance.
None at all. Achieving objectives like entering unmanned territory or getting unparalleled success without the target nation having a clue.
And they always praise the military brilliance, right? Like it's this super clever, masterful move that just blindsided the opponent.
Yeah, always. But that's where the story starts to diverge from reality, isn't it?
That's exactly where we hit the first, and honestly, probably the biggest disconnect from how these high-stakes operations actually work. What's really fascinating, and what our sources just keep pointing to, is that when you dig into the mechanics of international relations, and you look at advanced intelligence gathering, the whole idea of a complete, unannounced surprise attack, especially when you're talking strategic level, involving assets everyone knows are globally significant, like a B-2 bomber.
Right.
It's largely a fundamental misconception. It just doesn't really happen that way between major powers.
So what does happen?
In reality, the major global powers, and this includes close allies, but also potential adversaries, they often have precise, advanced knowledge of these big strategic bomber movements and other high-profile military actions, too.
Precise knowledge. How far in advance are we talking? Like an hour?
We're not talking a few hours heads up.
Yeah.
We're talking potentially days in advance sometimes.
Days. Wow, okay, that completely shatters the image, doesn't it? Just flips that whole surprise attack script on its head.
It really does.
But how? How do they get that knowledge days in advance? Is it like official warnings, back channels, spy satellites?
It's rarely just one thing. It's more like a sophisticated mosaic of intelligence gathering.
Yeah.
Think about it. Major powers are constantly monitoring huge areas of global airspace communications.
Okay.
So when an operation of this size involving strategic bombers is being planned and executed, it leaves behind this massive digital and logistical footprint. You can't really hide it.
What kind of footprint?
Well, think about satellite imagery. It can pick up unusual activity at air bases, ground crews, prepping specific aircraft. Then Then there's the surge in certain kinds of communications traffic, maybe encrypted, maybe not, movements of support personnel, tankers, equipment, even just the sheer amount of jet fuel being moved around specific locations.
Right, it's not subtle.
Not at all. Each of these things leaves a kind of signature. So intelligence agencies, they piece together maybe hundreds or even thousands of these tiny indicators, and they build up an incredibly accurate picture.
Accurate enough to know it's coming.
Often, yeah. They can anticipate the type of assets involved. Like, okay, this pattern looks like B-2 prep. They can figure out the general trajectory, maybe even the approximate timing.
So the underlying idea is that a true bolts from the blue strategic surprise between superpowers is just almost impossible.
Extremely difficult, if not impossible, without risking a catastrophic miscalculation. And that's the key phrase, miscalculation. It's not necessarily about one side having way better spies. It's the sheer scale and nature of these huge, globally significant operations. They simply can't be hidden completely.
Right. And to really get why that surprise narrative falls apart, we need to get into the nuts and bolts of it, the logistics. What it actually takes to send something like a strategic bomber across the globe.
Exactly. Because, as the sources show, the B-2's own design and its operational needs, ironically, make it pretty visible in a strategic way. Let's dig into those logistical realities.
Okay, so first, the specific mission we're using as a baseline involved a very particular piece of hardware. Our sources talk about the GBU-57.
Ah, the MOP, Massive Ordnance Penetrator.
Right, the bunker buster,
Yeah.
which is just this absolutely giant specialized penetrating bomb, not your average bomb.
No way. It's designed for really hardened targets, deep underground bunkers, heavily reinforced command centers, that sort of thing. Things buried under meters of concrete and steel.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting and immediately narrows down the possibilities. The B-2 Spirit bomber. It's the only aircraft in the entire U.S. inventory capable of carrying and delivering this specific bomb.
Because of its sheer size and weight, yeah. Nothing else has the base size or the lift capacity.
Think about that. If intelligence suggests a target needs that specific bomb, the GBU-57,
then you know the delivery system has to be a B-2. There's no other option.
it makes the bomber's involvement almost predictable, right? Once you understand the ordnance needed, the bomb dictates the plane.
That's a critical piece of the puzzle right there. And the B-2 itself, it's not just any plane. It's incredibly unique, specialized, but it also comes with some really significant characteristics and limitations that often get glossed over in those heroic narratives.
Like what?
Well, for starters, the B-2 is actually decades old. Its design goes back to the 1980s. It first flew in '89.
Wow, okay. So it's not exactly brand new tech, even though it looks futuristic?
Not at all. It's a powerful machine, obviously, but it's venerable. One source described it kind of affectionately, I think, as an old grandpa plane.
An old grandpa plane? Seriously?
Yeah, implying its age, you know.
Yeah.
And the intensive care it needs. It's apparently super delicate for such a powerful thing, requires extensive, almost constant maintenance.
The kind of maintenance. More than a regular jet.
Oh, way more. We're talking complex, really time-consuming procedures, specialized coatings for the stealth skin that have to be maintained perfectly, intricate system checks before any flight. It highlights the hidden costs, the immense complexity behind keeping these invisible assets operational.
So despite being like America's face for projecting global power,
Yeah, the symbol.
its age actually creates real operational limits, like how many can fly at once?
Absolutely. In terms of readiness, deployment tempo, it's a factor.
Yeah.
And you mentioned numbers. That's another constraint.
How many are there?
The U.S. only has about 20 B-2s in total? Maybe 21 initially, but attrition happens. It's an incredibly small, exclusive fleet.
20. That's it for the whole world.
Basically, yeah. And out of that tiny fleet, several are usually down for that deep, extensive maintenance at any given time. You might only have, say, a dozen or so actually mission ready.
Okay, so if you deploy a significant number, the sources mentioned a mission with 7 B-2s.
7. That's a huge chunk of the operational fleet. You're putting maybe half or even more of your active B-2s into one mission.
That can't be settled.
Not on a strategic level. No way. That alone makes it a highly visible event. It's not something you can just quietly slip under the radar, pun intended. The sheer commitment of such rare assets signals something big is happening. The global intelligence community will notice that.
Okay, old, delicate, small fleet, high maintenance. What else?
Then there's this other crucial point, its symbolic value and its critical vulnerability, which sounds like a paradox, but bear with me.
Okay.
The B-2 is described as a weapon that cannot be touched. Now, that doesn't mean it's physically invincible. It means its political and strategic significance is off the charts. Meaning, if someone were to strike, damage, or, God forbid, shoot down a B-2, that would be instantly seen as a direct act of war against the United States. Full stop.
A red line.
A massive one. An action like that would almost certainly trigger a swift, full-scale retaliation. The kind of response no major power, not even a potential adversary, wants to provoke.
So they wouldn't dare attack it, even if they could.
Exactly. This critical symbolic value means adversaries, who are acutely aware of these astronomical stakes, deliberately avoid engaging them. Even if they technically could track or target one, the cost of succeeding is just too high. Not in military hardware, but in triggering an uncontrollable escalation, World War III type stakes.
That's a really weird dynamic.
Yeah.
It's almost too valuable to fight, which ironically makes it safer. Not because it's invincible, but because nobody wants the consequences of touching it.
Precisely. It's untouchable in a political and strategic sense.
No.
But then you run into another fundamental paradox, a really practical one.
Line?
Something as basic as fuel. And this is where the theoretically invisible bomber starts becoming very, very visible to anyone paying attention.
The logistics bite back again.
This is truly where that popular stealth narrative starts to unravel big time. Because when a B-2 is loaded up with that GBU-57 bomb...
The bunker buster.
Yeah, which is just massive, extremely heavy ordnance, the plane becomes technically overloaded, not dangerously so, but in terms of its optimal weight distribution and the stress on the airframe for takeoff.
So what does that mean practically?
It means to even get off the runway with that kind of payload, it simply cannot carry a full tank of fuel.
Really? It has to fly light on fuel.
Has to. Our sources say it can often only manage maybe 1/3, sometimes even just 1/4 of its total fuel capacity before it even lifts off.
Wow. So it's starting its mission practically on fumes. A massive handicap from the get-go.
Pretty much. It's starting with an empty stomach, you could say. But then you add another problem.
Which is?
The inconvenient fact that the B-2, despite all its stealth tech and cool looks, is also a super fuel inefficient aircraft.
It guzzles gas. Why? Is it the shape?
Yeah.
The engines?
It's largely the design. That unique flying wing shape is amazing for stealth, right? No tail fins, fewer surfaces to reflect radar.
Yeah.
But aerodynamically, it creates significant drag, especially at lower altitudes and speeds, like during takeoff, landing, or even when maneuvering slowly to hook up with a tanker. It's not the most efficient shape for just cruising.
So the engines have to work harder.
Constantly working harder, pushing against more resistance than a more conventional plane. So it just burns through fuel at an incredible rate, especially compared to its fuel capacity.
Okay, so let me get this straight. It can take off full of fuel when carrying the big bomb.
Right.
And it burns through the fuel it can carry really, really quickly.
You got it. Those two factors combined create an immediate and constant need for in-flight refueling.
Immediate, like right after takeoff.
Pretty much from the moment it gets to a safe altitude. It requires continuous aerial refueling support. It simply cannot complete its mission, especially a long-range one, without that lifeline. Like, physically impossible.
And that brings us to the core paradox, doesn't it? How the invisible becomes visible. The tankers.
Bingo. The critical role of tanker support, because while the B-2 itself is engineered for maximum stealth,
Its support aircraft, the tankers, are absolutely not.
not even slightly, they are the opposite. Big conventional aircraft. Easily detectable by any modern radar system. Huge radar signatures.
There's an analogy in the source material that really nails this.
Yeah, it's incredibly vivid, really helps you grasp it. Imagine the B-2 is like a soldier, perfectly camouflaged, blending into the background. A ghost, seemingly invisible.
Yeah.
But right behind that soldier, practically tethered to them, is a nurse in a white coat. Big, obvious, stands out like a sore thumb.
And the nurse represents the tanker.
Exactly. The nurse in the white coat is the aerial refueling tanker holding an IV drip. The fuel boom continuously connected to the soldier, keeping them going.
I see where this is going.
The point is powerful.
Yeah.
You don't even need to find the camouflaged soldier if you spot that obvious nurse in the white coat.
You know exactly where the soldier is.
Exactly. You know where they are, where they're heading, what they're up to. The non-stealthy support asset completely gives away the location of the stealth asset it's supporting.
That's a brilliant analogy. It just flips the whole search problem. Don't look for the hidden thing. Look for the giant, obvious thing tethered to it.
Right. It's like following footprints in the snow.
And the sheer scale of this support makes it even more obvious, right? For that deployment of 7 B-2s.
Our source mentions needing something like 20 to 30 nurses, 20 to 30 tankers.
20 to 30, following this formation.
Across potentially vast distances, yeah. Just picture that. Dozens of large non-stealthy aircraft, often flying in specific, predictable racetrack patterns, waiting for the bombers, trailing them. It's not a tiny blip on a screen. It's a massive aerial ballet.
A very visible ballet.
Visible across the electromagnetic spectrum. Radar, electronic signals, intelligence, everything.
Okay, but here's the part that really blew my mind from the sources. The tankers aren't even trying to hide.
This is the kicker, the truly counterintuitive part that just demolishes the popular surprise attack myth.
Wow.
They do the opposite.
What do you mean?
Unlike, say, some military transport planes or spy planes that might turn off their transponders, those signals broadcasting their identity and location in certain zones to be sneaky.
Yeah.
The refueling tankers accompanying the B-2s deliberately keep their coordinate signals open. Their transponders are on, broadcasting.
Throughout the entire mission. From takeoff to landing.
The entire time, departure, mid-flight rendezvous points, the return leg.
Yeah.
They are actively, openly broadcasting their exact position, altitude, and identity to anyone with the receiver, which includes civilian air traffic control and, more importantly, military radar systems of all major powers.
Wait, they want to be seen. That seems completely backwards for a stealth operation. Why on earth would they do that? It's like putting up a giant neon sign saying, B-2 refueling happening right here.
Precisely. It is completely counter to the simple idea of stealth. This act, this deliberate open broadcasting, our source describes it as being like the tankers are waving a white flag.
A white flag, like surrender.
No, not surrender. It's a signal. A clear, unmistakable message. It's openly broadcasting their presence and their specific purpose, refueling to all major powers. That includes nations that might be considered adversaries, like Russia, or key allies in Europe who aren't directly involved but are definitely watching.
So it's communication.
It's absolutely a form of strategic communication, a very loud form. It's basically saying, look, we're here, we're refueling a strategic asset known to be capable of certain things, but note our non-aggressive posture, note our transparency. We are not initiating a surprise first strike against you. This is a specific, targeted action elsewhere.
It's a de-escalation tactic built right into the operation itself.
Exactly, built in from the very beginning. It's designed to prevent misinterpretation by other major powers who are inevitably tracking this massive aerial movement.
So the implication for the whole surprise idea is it's just gone, completely shattered.
Utterly. This deliberate transparency means that major powers like Russia or key European allies with their sophisticated radar networks, their intelligence assets, satellites, they are fully aware of the B-2's precise location and flight path, essentially, from the moment they take off and link up with those tankers.
You can track them every step of the way.
Every step. The narrative of an invisible bomber executing a complete surprise attack just becomes impossible. It's not about the adversary having bad intelligence. It's about fundamental operational reality and a deliberate choice for transparency by the operators.
Wow. Okay. So that leads us to the bigger picture, right? The strategic meaning behind all this. If it's not about surprise, what is it about?
Absolutely. This takes us into the deeper, more profound strategic implications. These high-stakes military operations, they're actually less about unilateral surprise and much more about a kind of carefully orchestrated, complex double act.
A double act? Between who?
Between the powerful nations involved, implicitly. The real audience for the show, the dramatic headlines, the public pronouncements, might actually be the broader public, maybe domestic audiences, maybe smaller nations.
But the main players know what's going on.
The actual players, the militaries, the intelligence agencies, the governments on all sides, they are often fully aware of the script, or at least the general plot outline and the intentions. It's like a highly choreographed performance for external consumption, while the real communication is happening behind the scenes or through these very visible, deliberate signals like the tanker's transponders.
The well-rehearsed double act. I like that phrase. It suggests a level of almost coordination, or at least mutual understanding, that we don't normally associate with tense military situations.
It's a necessary understanding, though.
So if the goal isn't true tactical surprise against another major power, what is the overriding goal? The paramount objective.
The overriding goal, consistently in these situations involving major powers and strategic assets, is to avoid miscalculation.
Avoid miscalculation.
That is absolutely paramount, especially when you're dealing with nuclear-armed states or operations involving assets like the B-2 that could be perceived as nuclear capable even if they aren't on that specific mission.
Why is that so crucial?
Because miscalculation, mistaking intent, engaging accidentally, targeting the wrong thing could so easily lead to unintended escalation. And between major global powers, that kind of escalation could spiral into catastrophic conflict, nuclear war even.
So all this transparency, the tankers broadcasting, maybe back-channel talks, it's all designed to prevent that spiral.
Precisely. This principle isn't new. It goes way back to the Cold War. Doctrines were built around preventing miscalculation when the stakes were global annihilation. That's why things like the military-to-military hotlines were established, dedicated, secure lines precisely for situations like this to deconflict, to clarify intentions, even during crises.
So the open transponders, the advanced awareness, it's a modern version of that, ensuring no one makes a fatal mistake.
Exactly. It's all about making sure there are no misunderstandings, no accidental engagements, no triggers for a wider war based on faulty assumptions about what's happening.
That makes a tremendous amount of sense. It really shifts the focus from just military might to this complex dance of diplomacy and strategic communication, even when bombs are potentially involved.
It's a constant negotiation of risk.
And the sources gave some really compelling, generalized examples of this kind of preemptive awareness and communication, right, often in Western contexts.
They did. Think about past NATO-related operations, maybe in the Middle East or Europe. There have been numerous instances, often not publicized, where nations with potentially opposing interests or even just neutral countries nearby received some form of advance notice about bomber movements or major exercises.
How would that notice be given?
Usually through discrete diplomatic back channels or established military-to-military communication links. It's not necessarily a public announcement.
And the purpose?
To allow those other nations to make informed decisions. Maybe adjust their own air defense postures, or simply to ensure their forces don't accidentally engage something they weren't meant to. It's pragmatic. It serves everyone's interest in avoiding a bigger conflict blowing up by mistake.
So these channels are used for things like B-2 deployments.
The sources indicate these very mechanisms are often activated for high-profile strategic asset movements, confirming flight paths, general timing. Overall purpose is not directed at you, even if the specific target details remain classified.
And sometimes you can even see clues after the fact, right? Like assets being moved before a strike.
Hypothetically, yes. In some past scenarios, observers might note that sensitive movable assets, maybe mobile missile launchers, high-value aircraft, even key personnel, were relocated from an area before it was struck.
Which would strongly suggest
Prior knowledge, and a deliberate choice by the target side to avoid direct confrontation, to essentially step aside. It's a subtle acknowledgement. Okay, we see you, we know it's coming, we're not playing this round.
a way to de-escalate without losing face completely.
Something like that. And similarly, even when retaliatory strikes happen sometimes, there are indications that the timing, maybe even the general target area, might be communicated in advance. Again, it's all about controlling the escalation ladder, trying to keep things contained.
It's an unbelievably intricate ballet happening behind the scenes.
It really is. And this proactive communication, this transparency, it extends right up to the highest levels, especially during potentially risky diplomatic visits. The sources highlighted a couple of really stark historical examples.
Like Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan.
Exactly. That generated huge global tension, loads of speculation, very public warnings.
And the stakes were immense. As Speaker of the House, she's third in line for the presidency. Any hostile act against her plane
would be an unambiguous act of war against the U.S., demanding a massive response, a red line nobody wanted to cross or even accidentally stumble over.
So what did the sources say happened behind the scenes? That long flight path?
Right. The plane took this really long roundabout route, flew a big circle, took over 10 hours longer than necessary. The public narrative was maybe caution, avoiding danger zones.
But the real reason?
The source suggests it was actually a deliberate strategic move by the U.S. military. Not out of fear, but to discreetly yet definitively communicate the exact flight path and timing to key strategic powers, including those publicly objecting to the visit.
Why?
To ensure zero misinterpretation. No chance of an accidental engagement. No possibility of some regional commander making a catastrophic mistake. They were effectively broadcasting her location and slow, predictable progress to prevent any misunderstanding that could ignite a massive conflict.
So the delay wasn't fear, it was communication. De-escalation disguised as caution.
That seems to be the interpretation, yes. A calculated act of transparency to prevent a global crisis. It totally reframes that event.
And then there was President Biden's visit to Kiev. Even more direct.
Hugely direct. An unprecedented trip by a U.S. president into an active war zone where the opposing side had active air capabilities, the risk of an accidental strike on him or his convoy.
Unthinkable consequences could trigger a global conflict instantly.
Absolutely. So, to manage that immense risk, what did the U.S. do? According to the source, the U.S. military directly notified the adversary of Biden's entire itinerary.
They told him he was coming, when and where.
Precise entry times, exit times, routes used, all of it. This wasn't because the adversary's spies figured it out. It was a deliberate, direct notification from the U.S.
Wow.
To protect the entire Earth, as the source put it, to remove any possibility that his presence could be misidentified as a threat or that his convoy could be accidentally targeted in the fog of war. It was about ensuring no catastrophic mistake.
Protect the entire Earth. That phrase just hits hard. It really underlines the stakes, doesn't it? The priority shifts completely from tactical surprise to just ensuring global stability.
Exactly. Preventing unintended Armageddon becomes job one.
And this whole need for transparency, for extreme caution, it loops right back to the B-2 and its other capability, right? The nuclear one.
It absolutely does. And that's probably the deepest layer here. The B-2's ability to carry nuclear weapons, it's sometimes called the doomsday bird, for a reason, capable of delivering city-destroying, even country-destroying payloads.
That capability means any deployment is sensitive.
Extremely sensitive, even if the mission is purely conventional, like dropping bunker busters. A deployment of multiple B-2s, like the 7 we talked about, could theoretically be misinterpreted by another nuclear power as a precursor to a nuclear first strike.
And that misinterpretation could be catastrophic.
The end of the world as we know it. The risk of that kind of misinterpretation sparking a nuclear exchange, however small the chance, is simply too high for any rational major power to tolerate.
So the transparency isn't just about avoiding conventional conflict escalation.
It's fundamentally about nuclear deconfliction as well. The white flags waved by the tankers, the open signals, the likely back-channel notifications, it's all part of this broader, painstakingly managed system to project conventional power without accidentally tripping the nuclear wire.
Okay, so bringing this all together, as we wrap up this deep dive, it's just crystal clear, isn't it? The reality of these big military operations, especially with strategic assets like the B-2, it's just vastly more intricate, more carefully managed.
And paradoxically more transparent, at least between the major players.
Than what we usually see in the headlines or the quick social media takes.
Yeah.
It's not just about having the biggest stick or the sneakiest plane.
No, it's this incredibly delicate, high-stakes dance. Logistics, yes. Technology, yes. But also sophisticated strategic communication and this profound, often unspoken mutual understanding between major powers about the rules of the game.
And the ultimate goal, overriding everything else,
is always to prevent that global miscalculation, to avoid the spark that could ignite an uncontrollable, potentially civilization-ending fire.
Right. So the essence of strategic deterrence today, it's not just about showing off your military strength, having those powerful symbols like the B-2.
No, it relies just as much, maybe even more so, on clear communication, on coordination, on a shared understanding of red lines and intentions, even with adversaries. It's about preventing the misunderstandings that could lead to devastating conflict.
The reality is just so much more subtle, more interconnected, more reliant on deliberate signaling than the simple narratives we often get.
It's a constant, mostly unseen conversation happening just beneath the surface of world events.
That's a really powerful takeaway. Okay, so here's the final thought we want to leave you, the listener, with. Something to mull over after this deep dive.
In this world we live in now, just saturated with information, so much of it amplified, maybe distorted, often sensationalized by algorithms and quick takes.
How crucial is it for you to try and look beyond those first easy headlines? How important is it to dig a bit deeper, to question the immediate narrative, to try and grasp the really nuanced realities of international relations, of military strategy?
What responsibility do we all maybe share in trying to tell the difference between genuine strategic realities and, well, narratives that might be carefully constructed or maybe just easily misinterpreted?
What hidden nurses in white coats might be out there right now waving their white flags, signaling things we don't immediately understand if only we knew how to look, and what those signals truly mean? Something to think about.